So yeah, anyway, that guy Mukherjee probably come around mid-February for a
That'd be
visit.
cool. Nice. Too bad I won't be there.
Yeah, well,
I'm missing all the faculty tours.
yeah, you're missing all the fun, but well, I think if we're lucky, this. Okay, cost benefits. Right. Okay, so I was there. Where did you lose? Where did I lose you?
The next.
This one. Yeah. So this was a citrus pest problem. All right. Did I? Were you still on when I was getting through that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're on the home stretch when that cut out. So if you
All
have
right.
any final remarks on it, I think that's where we're at.
Okay, so good. So there's a couple of other famous examples. This is a moth that was used to control an invasive cactus problem in Australia. So these things can be very effective, and they're very specific. So this moth was not going to eat anything else. So now in Australia, where they used to have hundreds of thousands of hectares of cactus, where cactus was never found before, is now just down to a few plants, and it has not bounced back. Then there was this banana plantation. I visited this place, and they were almost organic certifiable, though they were not certified organic. But from a pesticide perspective, they almost used no pesticides at all. They used to use pesticides in large amounts. And they began in 1954. There was a weevil, a type of beetle, and then thrips, which is a tiny insect that scars the leaves and the fruits. So they started spraying. And then 4 years later, they had 7 more pests than they had before. So this is the treadmill. You start to kill one thing, and soon you have more and more. Then they decided in 1973 that the cost of spraying was so high, they couldn't afford to do it anymore. They could not make any profit. So they stopped. And then the pest populations crashed. They just went down to nearly zero. So they learned. It was hard. The entomologists told the managers, if we stop spraying, the pest populations will go away. We'll go back to before 1954. And the men who led this said to me, it was horrible. You look out at the fields of banana and you would see only the stems and no leaves. But then it started to work. The plants would grow new leaves and they would not be eaten. And after a year or so, they had full production of bananas, no spraying, and no pests. But they learned a few other things along the way. They had to learn to leave, when they cut the banana, they cut down the stalk that grew that banana, and they don't clean it up. They just leave it to decompose on the ground. Why? The juices from the decaying banana plant were the food source for the adults of the natural enemies that attacked the pests of the banana plants. So they diversified the environment in a little way, that helped the natural enemies. So they said that once in a long while they would still go out with the spray and just a little bit here, a little bit there, if they saw the possibility of something beginning to take off. But they never spray the whole place. They only use just tiny amounts here and there. And they had complete control, basically, without any pesticide, where they used to have tremendous pesticide bill to pay every year. So, I mean, that's like one of these success stories that we hope can be copied, but it required knowledge. It required observation of nature, observation of what's going on in the plantations, and trying to make some decision about how can we establish the way to make those natural enemies more abundant in the plantation and let them do the work. And ultimately, they were quite successful with it. Okay. So when we're trying to find something that to control a pest, whether it's organic or not, then we want it to be organic. It should be very specific. So this is like this Bt toxin, Bacillus thuringiensis, that's used on caterpillars. It kills almost any kind of leaf-eating caterpillar. The caterpillar must actually swallow the material, swallow the bacteria, not the toxin. Once the bacteria is inside the caterpillar, then it starts to grow and produces the toxin that kills the caterpillar. So it may be costly, but it has fewer negative side effects. So we'd like to think that if we think broadly about the off-target sites and the costs that are outside of the farm, we've reduced those. So we're not billing our society for the effects of our use of toxins. In this case, it's something that just goes on the target plant. It doesn't get carried to anything that will be harmed by it. We can eat this bacterium and it doesn't affect us at all, but the caterpillars cannot. So it's a very effective control, but it's an endangered control because it's been used as a GMO. It's been bred and transferred into certain crop plants, particularly maize, that will then be toxic to the caterpillars that eat the leaves. So now it's going to increase the exposure, increase the danger of the evolution of resistance. So one of the many reasons to not do it. So then there's other ways to have biological control that's maybe a little less biological, but it's still based on knowledge of the biology of the pest organisms. So what we call disruptors of reproduction, pheromones. These are the molecules that insects send out into the air to attract mates. So it's a perfume to a moth. You know, this is perfume means there's someone near me who would like to mate. So they go looking. So there's a particularly devastating forest pest called gypsy moth, and they communicate with each other by way of this chemical scents, these lures. You can see the bottom moth has very wide antennae like feathers. That's to help detect the pheromones emitted by members of its species. So one of the ways one can disrupt the activities of insects is to use pheromone traps. You have to have a source of the chemical that that insect uses to attract mates. So this photo below is a pheromone trap that will lure the insects in. And then once they're inside, they can't get out. So they will die in there. And so there's quite a number of different pheromone lures for different types of insect. It seems counterintuitive that you don't want to attract these things to your area, but once they are there, then they go to the trap and not to another member of their own species. And then you dispose of them. They can't survive. So this is very effective. I've used it myself. There's a type of beetle that's an introduced pest beetle in North America, originally from Asia. And there's a pheromone lure You hang it out in the back of the house, and it will fill up with these beetles in a few days if they are abundant. And you just keep filling it and killing them and filling it and killing them, and eventually there are no more. And you haven't had to spray anything anywhere. You just let them come to the trap. Growth inhibitors, there's chemicals, sort of biochemicals that are involved in the growth cycle of insects. And so you use those and they will disrupt the natural growth cycle. These are only going to affect the insects that are exposed to it, and they don't have any effect on non-insect animals. Male sterilization is being used in some kinds of pest control where on purpose you grow a lot of these pest insects and then you segregate out the males and then sterilize them either chemically or with radiation and then release them. And then they go out and mate with the females, but they are sterile. And the female thinks, I have mated, that's it, I will go lay eggs. And she goes and lays the eggs, but they are not fertilized eggs, so they don't grow. So it's a way of reducing the population. It's probably not a practical measure for organic farming, but it is one in public health. So there's a lot of talk about using this kind of technique for controlling mosquito-borne diseases. So when we want to know what's good for biological control, it should be specific. It should target a particular type of insect or maybe a few closely related ones. As a biological, like a natural enemy, it should have a high reproductive rate. That's what this little R is about. It should be relatively high dispersal. That is, it should get around on its own fairly easily. You know, it flies or whatever. And then you want to look at several different agents that can control a single type of pest. Now, and it also works best if the target organisms, the pests themselves, don't reproduce quite as fast as their natural enemies. This is often the case in the parasite relationships, not so much in the predators. And also good if they don't have as high dispersal and if they have longer lifespan. So they're relatively slow growing by comparison. So there's a lot of different cases of this that work on plant pests. The example on the slide is this thing called tansy ragwort, which just takes over fields. But there's a plant herbivore, this moth, and its caterpillar that just eat tansy ragwort. They don't eat anything else. So that is a fairly effective control. There's various other, like the cactus in Australia was one, but there's others that affect weedy plants. But primarily we're talking about insect pests of plants, not the other way around. Okay, so integrated pest management is something it's an idea that's been around that helps to reduce the cost of pest control. That banana plantation in Costa Rica would be a good example of integrated pest management, even though it's not organic. They used natural methods as much as possible, and only when they got worried about something did they use a small amount of a chemical control pesticide. But so this is the basic idea is that you use multiple techniques. You don't just rely on one thing. You have to remember when we're trying to do organic, or we could even call it ecological farming, we have to think what nature would look like and try to do as much of that as possible. So crop rotations, we want to diversify in time. So one location, different times we grow different things, or grow many different things in one spot at the same time. And we use plants that may repel pests or provide chemical signaling cover. But the other thing is, if you can detect when the economic damage is happening, you just try to avoid the pest getting to that point. But you don't attack the pest when it's at no economic damage at all. You have to be an observer. You have to be out there doing what we call scouting the field, or just having your eyes on the situation and knowing what's going on. Is it getting to the point where it looks like it's going to damage your economic return, either through unsightly crop product or destroying the crop entirely? So that's why I put in red, intense field monitoring. You have to be watching what's going on. You can't just go away and come back and hope that everything is still good. So this graph is a little hard to interpret, but essentially if you look at the percent of the pest population remaining, if it's really low, the cost of treatment is going to be high because you're trying to get the last few individuals of that population. And that usually costs a lot more than just getting most of them. So on the right-hand side, where it would be like 100% of the population is there, the crop value is going down, but the cost of treatment is relatively low because there's a lot of the pest, and you can quickly reduce their numbers with a single application of your control agent. So somewhere in here, you're trying to balance you're trying to have more value in the crop than the cost of treatment. So you're never going to get rid of them all, so you don't try, because that would reduce your profitability dramatically. And you don't wait until the crop value is so low that you're going to not have much of a return. So it's somewhere in the middle. You have some pests remaining, but it's not affecting your economic return that much. So the crop value curve is kind of flat, and then it drops off dramatically if the pest population is high. So it's finding that balance between how much is it economically useful to spend and what are you going to get. So you have to do this sort of cost benefit calculation. And you may have to do that by what we say, by the seat of your pants. There may not be a good way to say analyze this, but use your best judgment and experience, I guess, is what you have to accumulate. Okay. So this is a couple of other aspects about biocontrol and integrated pest management. There was a big agribusiness operation in northern Costa Rica that ended up providing a payment to a conservation network called the Guanacaste Conservation Area for the environmental services provided by the protection of forest and watershed around the Grupo del Oro's cultivated areas. So this was a case where maintaining biodiversity in the neighborhood helped to reduce the pest pressure on plantations of citrus and other crops being raised by Grupo del Oro. Now, can organic agriculture adopt IPM? Yes. So it's probably the easiest way for some people to transition from chemical agriculture to organic is by way of integrated pest management. The last step is to substitute out all of the prohibited control techniques, the chemicals basically, and adopt only organically certifiable ones. But then the foundation of organic, of course, is plant health. And the healthier plant is less susceptible to the attacks by insect herbivores. Probably the four-legged ones don't really care how healthy the plant is. They might prefer a good organically grown plant, but that's another problem. And I'm mainly thinking in terms of insects and stuff like that today. So we've seen that there's a lot of negative side effects of chemical controls. Don't need to go over that too much. And you can get a lot of different ways of biological control. Each one is specific to a certain area and set of conditions. And then one of the aspects or one of the ways to use biological control is in a holistic way. You're managing the whole environment around your farm area, within the farm area, in a direction that's going to make it more likely that natural forces will keep control over your pests and not have to resort to anything else. And of course, again, foundation is plant health. Stressed plants are weak plants, and they often convey their stressed and weak condition by chemical communication that insects can detect. So anyway, that's more or less what I had to say today about this subject. And what I can do now is, wait a minute, where are we? Meeting controls. Oops, stop share. All right, there we go. Okay, I'm back, or at least I can see. So, anything that you guys have experienced or done that relates to this?
I got a story. By accident, I found out that I had a big black beetle that was eating the banana leaves. But because of the mulch I used, there were a lot of almond nuts in the mulch, and they started sprouting. And now the black beetles are moving from the banana trees to the almond trees, and they eat them and leave my banana trees alone.
Ah, perfect. Sometimes called a trap crop. Or, yeah, you give them something else that they like. Good, in the back.
I have a question. What about prevent in this aspect of pests?
Well, someone will have to repeat the question for me up front.
Sam, if you want to talk about the prevention of diseases or the insects, how you can do it.
Sorry, the prevention?
Yes.
All of these things like increasing diversity of plants in the neighborhood, in the area around and in your farm should help prevent. Now, the gentleman just mentioned about the beetles. That was a very clear case where a little bit more diversity, one more kind of plant, gave them something that they like better. So that's one good case, but prevention is, always the best. And that's where I think plant health. So everything that you've been studying and practicing regarding improving the plant nutrition and you know, like stability of their water supply and the micronutrients and just general soil quality. That's the best prevention. After that, yes, if that doesn't quite do it, you may have to go to some actual control technique. But you have to think, what are your friends in the environment? Are there birds that eat insects? Probably there are. Do they need something to be a part of your farm? Do they need a place to nest? Do they need a little water or something? You know, I don't know. There's probably many different kinds of birds, and some eat insects and some do not. I hope that none of them are pests on your farms as well, but for the most part, they tend to eat. Some birds eat seeds, some birds eat insects, some birds eat both, but whatever you can do to notice what's going on around, try to find ways to promote the things that help and to reduce the things that don't. But the foundation, of course, is always soil, soil, soil. Improved fertility, improved balance of the nutrients available in the soil. Anything else? I hope that helps. It's a kind of open-ended question. A lot of different things could be done.
I mean, one way to maybe target in what Sam is saying is that if you notice that you have a consistent problem with a specific bug, start researching that bug and research the predators, research the things that eat that bug. And then if you find something that eats that bug, make it easy for that predator to live in your field or live around your property. So
Yeah.
if you find a beetle and it just so happens that a specific local bird eats that beetle, figure out what kind of birdhouse that bird likes to live in, and then put up a few of those birdhouses. This is something that we do in like organic cattle management. If we do integrated pest management for cattle, you tend to have flies. So you can put up birdhouses of birds that eat that specific fly. These birds will swoop around a cattle herd all day long, eating the flies off the backs of these cows. So what Sam is driving at in the observation part of be constantly aware of what's going on in your field. If you see a bug, learn more about it. And if it's a problem, find out what eats it and make a home for the things that eat that bug.
Right. And as a biologist, I'm not a specialist on insects by any means, and but I can tell you that if you want to know what it is, the best thing you can do is catch one and kill it and preserve it in something. I mean, even you know, a few drops of alcohol will knock it out. It will kill it off, and then save it so that if you can find some entomologist capable of identifying it, then you'll have something to give to that individual. Photos can be okay. If you're a good photographer, you get a very clear picture. That could be enough in some cases. But if you really want to know, you almost always have to get the insect to the specialist. Some things that are really common, yeah, you might be able to, you know, take your photo and then start looking for images online or something. But for the most part, getting some help from people in your region who are trained on insects, that's the best way to start. And then you can get into the specifics of what does that pest need for control. Or maybe, you know, its whole life cycle. You can learn how to disrupt the life cycle. So, you know, a lot of things will pass through a bad time of the year. So let's, you know, if it's the dry season, maybe the insect is not active during the dry season, but how is it surviving from wet season to wet season? Is it eggs, or is it buried adults or something else? Where are they hiding? Find out things like that, and then you can do things which will reduce their survival chances. So again, knowledge of the particular insect is always a good thing if you're trying to figure out what to do to get rid of it or to keep its populations down, because you'll never get rid of them, but you can reduce. Okay. And thank you, Chris. Other.
Is it difficult to raise the insects like the predators that you won't farm, and if you capture them, let's say, is it difficult to cultivate them?
Yeah, it is. I wouldn't say it's difficult, but it requires specialized knowledge, because most of them, the effective control agents, they really only eat their host type of insect. So typically these are things that are produced by professionals in business to grow these pest organisms and their predators, and then they harvest the predators for sale. So how that would work for someone, you know, at a farm, I'm not sure. Certain things I can see sometimes, yes, that, like there's a parasitoid of a caterpillar that eats cabbages and collard greens, other members of the same group. And the parasitized caterpillars will climb up onto something. It could be a tree branch or a wall nearby or a stone. And then they will undergo the final change, and the parasitoids will emerge and then form their own last life cycle steps. And so you'll find little tiny cocoons, each containing one wasp, and the shell of the caterpillar that they came out of. So that's something, okay, you know, I could pick those up and save them, and then in the next year, they'll come out. They'll wake up in the spring and start looking for their prey. But most of the time, I think you need to find a source, someone who has been preparing these. That's, given that you're in a small marketplace, it may be difficult. So best bet is to try and maximize the diversity of things in your environment that will support those natural enemies should they be present. And we hope that they are. And I wish I had an answer for bunchy top virus, but I know I'm not the only person in the world who doesn't. There are many, many, many who don't know what to do. But there are natural enemies of the leafhoppers. It's just a question of how effective are they.
Hey guys, any other questions, comments? No?
We're all done?
All right, guys. Well, good class. This is the last class of the like let's see, pest control section. So normally we would have a test on the following class, but we haven't been able to post the videos on YouTube of the previous classes yet. So we're going to delay probably until next Wednesday for the test over this content. I'm going to work with Snelio and Roland to get everything posted so that everyone has time to review. So next Monday will most likely be a lesson on compost. I'll be giving it. This will be the information that will be part of the practical test. So for the practicals, we'll have a written and hands-on portion to perform. I'll give you what I hope and expect you to know about compost from a technical and theoretical side. As Snelio and Roland will be getting you guys into building more compost and managing more compost. And then once I'm back, we'll be able to talk more and work more with compost as well. So Monday, at least Monday, will be a compost lesson. We'll see how much and how deep I decide to go. It should just be one day, but could be more. We'll see. Sound good?
Compost.
All right.
All
Well,
good.